Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Drexel Uni, and today I'm excited to have Jacob Sheldon, who's the founder of Shiny. Shiny is a tech-enabled talent marketplace for fractional executives. They match startups and SMBs to some of the 300 plus freelance executives in the pre-vetted talent pool. Jacob had earlier worked for Slice Capital and Silicon CFO, and he has done his bachelor's from Drexel University, and he's got funding from accelerator. Welcome to the show, Jacob.
Thank you for having me, Rohit.
Awesome. So you do have an interesting journey. You pretty early in your journey building Shiny. How did you go about building Shiny, and what got you excited to build it?
So I really started Shiny as an experiment under the Silicon CFO brand. I was a fractional CFO at the time for some very early stage startups and agencies. And that was what I was doing sort of to make a living after leaving my last startup. And I was seeing the demand side of these startups that needed support on a fractional basis. At the time, it was specifically finance support, finance and accounting, and primarily from founders that were technical, but or growth focused, and very much had to focus on either building the product or selling and growing the user base. And so there came a point where I didn't have, I guess I didn't want to take on more clients. I was looking for my next startup to start, and I started to turn down clients that were coming through my door. And I thought, well, that's kind of, it's kind of stupid to turn down clients. Why wouldn't I, at the very least, refer them out to some other fractional CFOs? So I started building up a talent pool of other fractional CFOs. And in that moment, I started to get a lot of applications from other people that frankly were more qualified than I was to do what I was doing. And the supply side really blew me away, just the number of people that were applying. And at that point, I realized, well, it sort of made sense to build a marketplace, at the very least, as an experiment. And this was the very end of 2019 when I had this realization and started to see the supply side for the market, for which I was already fulfilling the demand side for. So that's how I started it, as an experiment, as a fractional CFO marketplace. I started building it on the side, doing my fractional CFO work, and just handling everything manually, from the vetting process to the matching to the introductions and the follow-ups, the invoicing, everything I did manually on my own, organized it quite well in Excel and Airtable, Notion, and then automating as much as I could with the emails between Zapier and MailChimp and whatnot.
So super interesting. And before we talk more about what's a fractional CFO, is he somebody who works part-time, or he goes to the office? How would you term a fractional CFO? I mean,
Yeah, I'd say working remotely versus in person is sort of irrelevant to whether they're fractional or not. I'd say at this point, being fractional is primarily working remotely. But frankly, it's just sort of a rebranding of a part-time worker. Most importantly, it's someone who's coming into a company and working for a set number of hours or days per week or per month, and usually handling a specific role or having set responsibilities. So it's not just project to project. They're usually handling some aspect of the business on a fractional basis. And so this is most common for CFO and CMO roles, but we're seeing this a lot more with CTOs, COOs, CPOs, CCOs, CROs, and even beyond to non-C levels, even non-VP level roles, where companies are starting to look for a fractional designer or a fractional product manager, sometimes just because they need someone in very quickly, or because they just don't need them full-time, or they are struggling to find someone full-time for the role.
Got it. And did you find any insights about whether most of the fractional work is done by a certain gender or by a certain age group, or have X amount of experience to to do more of this fractional work?
Yeah, so for us, since we focus on C-level executives, we find that the average years of experience is about 16 years. The breakdown between genders, we don't have very much data on, but in our marketplace, it's fairly even, except a little bit more weight towards males on the fractional CFO role specifically. But otherwise, it's I'd say it's probably no different than for full-time roles.
Got it. And you had started Shiny before pandemic, but do you think the COVID did it accelerate the fractional work more, or did it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it did two things. It allowed for people to say, I'm working from home anyway, and so I'd rather work fractionally instead of full-time for a specific company. I can work fractionally for multiple companies, and it's a lot easier to now build out my consulting practice as a fractional executive. And then the other thing was it allowed for companies to be a lot more comfortable with hiring someone fractionally. Now, if they didn't have to come into the office, it's easier to hire them on a fractional remote basis than a fractional in-person basis.
Got it. Interesting. And I wanted to understand, especially when it comes to Silicon CFO, how was your experience building that, and how did you go about getting that opportunity?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably the same as anyone else's freelance or consulting, independent consulting experience, where I had just left the last startup that I was working on. And I was able to start off with one client that was essentially a close friend of mine that needed the support. And being his fractional CFO for his agency that he was starting to grow. The first client is always the most important when you're starting to grow a consulting practice. And I just worked to do a great job for him. And I even worked from his office in LA, where I was living at the time anyway. And what that did for me was it helped me get closer to the client. And we really became great friends after that. Helped me grow my client base as well, just being in his co-working space, but then also just getting referrals from him. And that helped me make a living from being an independent fractional CFO.
Got it. And how do most of the executives find their new gigs? Is it through references, or do they also look at job boards like AngelList and all
that? In terms of what actually works is networking and referrals. That's sort of the best active way to get clients as a fractional executive. You can look at job boards, but very few job boards online have lots of fractional roles being posted there. The passive way, on top of just the active networking, is using a platform like Shiny to sign up and passively get matched to roles that are coming onto the platform.
Got it. And on your marketplace, you have plus executives who can be hired, and you got you're working on top startups. Especially companies like Jeeves, which is one of the fastest growing startups in the world. How do you get those top startups to sign up with you?
Yeah, again, it's primarily through my network and the networks of the people in my network. Lot of work on that front of just meeting people, plugging into a bunch of different founder networks and founder communities. And then partnering with as many people as we can when it comes to VC firms, other types of investors, accelerators, agencies, and it's a lot of relationship building. And then on top of that, there's a little bit of content marketing that we do, email marketing, ads, and a little bit of SEO as well.
Interesting. And how do you go about vetting these fractional executives? Well, what would be the entire process for you?
Yeah, so we have essentially a 3-step process where every executive is still joining our waitlist, since although we have over 400 vetted executives, we have another 500 or more on our waitlist. And so they're joining our waitlist. And from there, we're looking at their profile and then bringing them off our waitlist and sending them a more detailed application just on Typeform. We get a deeper look at what their experiences have been, what they're good at, and what they're looking for. And then we interview every single one of them. In the interview, we're primarily looking for their communication skills. Do we think that they can be a good consultant or fractional consultant for a startup? And then doing a lot of data gathering on them as well, and asking them questions that they can't really answer on text in the type form. And so from there, we're able to vet them quite well and vet out the people who either don't have enough experience or don't have good communication skills. And then we sort of end the process with having a lot of data on them that really feeds into our matching process as we onboard them onto the marketplace.
Interesting. And how do you go about matching those executives to jobs? Is it a lot of manual work, or do you have a lot of data which backs you?
We do have a lot of data. I'd say it's not enough data in terms of we need a sort of a massive amount in order to fully automate it accurately in terms of both sides of our marketplace, and also just a lot of successful placements. And so it's still early days for us from that front, and we are working on automating it with an AI agent and refining that. But the process is still manual and will stay manual for a little while, where we have all of our data organized on the candidate side and the job side when a job comes into our platform. And so we're able to fairly easily filter through our database and look at a subset of the candidates to find some ideal ones for the job specifically. From there, we're then putting the job in front of the candidate, and they have to explain why they're a good fit for that role, specifically on a line-by-line basis for the responsibilities and qualifications. And so at that point, there's sort of our vetting process, our matching process, and then the structured cover letter from the candidates. And so you can call that sort of a multi-step vetting and matching process.
Interesting. And when it comes to these fractional executives making money, and I assume they can work anywhere from 2 hours to around 20 hours in a week. What's the kind of revenues they could make on the platform in a week?
Yeah, we typically see our executives charging somewhere between $100 and $250 per hour. Obviously, with some a little bit lower and some a little bit higher, even up to $500 per hour. It ranges a lot in terms of what they're able to charge, who based on their experiences, how much experience they've had, how many companies they've worked for, even just in the past year, and what their personal network looks like in terms of their own supply and demand. Obviously, supply of one person, and then potentially a lot more demand than others. And so the earnings potential is quite high. We do see a number of fractional executives that end up after a year working as a fractional executive, making more cash-wise than they would as a full-time executive. But it really depends. We see others that aren't making as much, some that are just doing it as a side hustle alongside their full-time job. And both are great options for joining our marketplace, whether you're looking to be full-time as a fractional executive or just as on the side as a side hustle.
Interesting. And did you find any specific criteria which makes one fractional executive stand out from others? And how much time do you think it takes for them to start with the first gig?
Yeah. It really comes down to when you speak with a fractional executive, say that we match you to, and you're looking to fill, say, a fractional CMO role, I wouldn't say there's any specific aspect of them that makes them a very good fractional executive. At the end of the day, it really comes down to, are you going to enjoy working with this person? And is it going to be a good relationship? At the end of the day, many of them, or I'd say almost all of them, can do exactly what you're looking for. It's just a matter of how your relationship with them will go and their communication with you.
Got it. And do you offer any other support other than matching candidates to jobs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on our platform, we have the functionality for this entire matching process and pitch process, as well as messaging once they're introduced, contract signing, invoicing, and payment processing. Once that all of that sort of in the past, we do support with regard to negotiations and liaising between the candidate and the employer, even post-placement, when potential issues pop up, when there's renegotiating of a contract and setting a new contract. And then we have communities on Slack for each fractional executive role that we support. And this has been a really great way for, say, fractional CMOs to meet other CMOs, ask very specific marketing management questions to them, and even share resources. And then it's also been a great way for us to stay in very close contact with our users.
Got it. Interesting. And you've been part of ODX accelerator. How's the entire journey of building a bootstrap company and then go on to raise funding from an accelerator?
Yeah, bootstrapping has been especially tough, especially as a marketplace where you really have to seed both sides manually. I'd say it's helped us, bootstrapping overall, compared with raising money. I see a lot of times companies raise money and then start burning capital very quickly. For us, we had to be very focused with what we were spending time on, but it also gave us the flexibility to make mistakes and not have this really tight runway to grow very quickly within. Bootstrapping, before even getting into an accelerator, it bootstrapped for about 1.5 years prior. And it was really just figuring out where we wanted to bring this business as we were growing it and continuing to validate it, doing things manually at first, and then starting to automate and starting to build a platform and launch a platform that handled a lot of what we were doing on our own, just offline. I'd say that was sort of necessary for us to get to where we were when we got into the accelerator. It was especially hard to build a team, but hiring people on a contractor fractional basis gave us a huge leg up, where we were able to utilize specialists, say a fractional designer, a fractional developer, and a fractional CMO, a fractional COO, in order to grow our team and stay lean. And then getting into ODX was a huge leg up for us, where it helped us grow both sides of our marketplace. We were able to plug into their network of founders, and we got a lot of them on the platform hiring fractional executives. And then we also were able to plug into their talent base, and a lot of people in the fellowships that were fractional executives joined our waitlist and then eventually joined our marketplace after we vetted them.
Interesting. I've been part of a few on-deck fellowships, and I think on-deck has a great network. You're talking about that before the call. But Jacob, I actually got to know about Shiny from Product Hunt. I think you've done a post over there, and that's how I got to know. What would it take for a founder to do well on Product Hunt, and any experience you can share on what was your exact strategy on putting Shiny on Product Hunt?
Yeah, so launching Shiny on Product Hunt was actually my second Product Hunt launch. My first was with Slice Capital, my last startup. We actually did better with Slice Capital and placed, I think, 4th or 5th. Doing well on Product Hunt has a lot of factors, but at the end of the day, the biggest factor is really doing a lot of manual work in terms of outreach to your network, and really using it as a marketing tool. I think the most valuable aspect of Product Hunt launches is not let me try for first place or second place or third place in that day. It's actually as a way to get early supporters for your product and your startup. So, using it as a tool to get customers is great. And then using it as a tool to get feedback, I think is potentially even better. And so we got a lot of great feedback on our Product Hunt launch, and we actually waited a long time to do it. Not specifically so that we could get the most out of it, but because we already had a lot of learnings from the first platform that we had launched in August of last year, that we were working on implementing into a newly designed platform with more functionality. And so we didn't launch on Product Hunt until we had that new platform launched and live, at which point it was a way for us to get more feedback and onboard more people onto the marketplace.
Interesting. And you had already talked about onboarding employees for your company. I was just wondering what are some of your signals on figuring out this candidate can be a high performer, and what are the red flags you look for when hiring people?
Yeah, I look frankly less at whether they're going to have really high output versus low output. The first thing that I'm looking for is, do I like this person as a person? And do I think I'm going to really enjoy working with them? And so sometimes it's easy to tell up front, but most of the time you kind of just have to work with them for say a month to determine whether they're going to be a good employee or contractor, whether they're going to do a good job working on whatever they're working on, and whether you're going to work well with them. And so I usually recommend hiring someone for 2 weeks or a month and giving them some specific projects so that you can just test them out. It's a very low risk, low cost way to plug someone into the team and see if they're going to work.
Got it. And are there any specific tests that you would suggest to founders on what metrics would you recommend for somebody who's going for a CMO or a CFO role, or even for a fractional role? What are the metrics they should be careful about?
Yeah, it's typically not about metrics, especially when hiring a C-level person, someone who's going to be managing a team, potentially growing a team and hiring a lot of people, but then also helping with setting strategy. And so you can try tracking metrics and setting metrics for them. There can be simple ones such as, we're trying to grow the team to these many people, we're trying to grow revenue to this much, we're trying to launch our product in this amount of time. But at the end of the day, you need a management team that you can trust, and a management team that's going to bring sort of their own network and their own expertise, so that you're better off with someone as your fractional C-level executive than if you didn't have them, or if you promoted someone internally to that role.
Got it. And when it comes to strategic decisions, how do you figure out if you should stick to the plan or change your strategy?
I used to be a lot more focused on my intuition when it comes to sort of how things feel and making quick decisions, and that works quite well a lot of the time. It's gotten me to where I am now, but I have been shifting more and more to a little bit more of a data-driven, more objective decision-making process for, say, most things in the company, especially using the growth marketing framework, growth experiments framework. And you can apply this to a lot of different things, even the strategy that you're setting, whether you should change strategy or stick to the current strategy. It's sort of setting expectations up front and setting a very specific experiment for what you're running, how long you're running it for, and what the minimum outcome is versus a target outcome. And then after the time frame that you set, just sort of seeing what the outcome was and comparing it to your expectations. It can make it at least a little bit more of an objective decision.
Got it. And you've been growing Shiny for a couple of years now. How does the decision making change, or does it need to change with scale?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we're still early. We're still working on the scaling aspects of the business. Yes, we have over 400 executives, and we've made over 50 placements. But a lot of it still runs through me for the decision making, or my co-founder for any of the tech decisions to be made. So far for us, it's been sort of finding the right people to operate different aspects of the business and to sort of own their own functions, and then giving them free range over what they want to do. They'll run things by me and I say, great, that sounds really good, let's do it. And so, yeah, still a lot of it, almost all of it is run by me, but more and more we're sort of giving people the autonomy to do what they want. And really the culture that we've been setting, my co-founder and I, is one where it'll move to be more and more autonomous, and it gives our employees and contractors the freedom to come up with their own ideas and make their own decisions.
Super interesting. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Previously, it was The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. But more recently, I think for marketplace founders specifically, The Cold Start Problem by Andrew Chen. Sorry, it's on my bookshelf next to me, just confirming the author. Yeah, it was really great for myself as a marketplace founder.
Interesting. Hard Thing About Hard Things is the most most requested book as a favorite book on the platform. But Cold Start Problem is a great book written by Andrew Chen. And if you could go back in time when you started Shiny, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
This is also kind of from the Cold Start Problem. There's a quote that Andrew wrote from Travis Kalanick. Had to do with product can solve problems, but it's slow. Ops is fast. So really focusing on scaling my operations team is something that I would have really spent a lot more time on in the early days. We were solely operations and no product for over a year, but then, like many founders do, they shift to being very product focused, potentially a little too soon, and instead of focusing on being operations focused and then plugging in the product alongside that to really take the burden off the operations team as you scale. That's definitely what I would have done a little differently if I went back a year or 2 years.
Very interesting. And do you have a favorite online tool, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
I mean, all those are great and ones that I use every day, including right now. But one that's maybe not as brand name is Reclaim.ai is a tool that I've really enjoyed using over the past 6 months or so. It just makes sure that I have every day on my calendar a block for lunch, a block for my morning catch up, my afternoon catch up, exercising, and my daily walk. And then on top of that, just starting to plug in some other sort of daily or weekly tasks that kind of moves around automatically.
Interesting. I'm going to put it on the show notes, and we'll have a look at Reclaim.ai. Jacob, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Shiny?
Connect with me on LinkedIn, just Jacob Sheldon, and learning about Shiny. Happy to answer any questions on LinkedIn over DM or on Twitter as well. And feel free to check us out at useshiny.com.
Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. Jacob, thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you for having me.